Welcome to the first installation of my series of practical, the practical, I don't even know what I'm calling this, the practical guide to mob attributes, or the attribute system, I guess, is the new feature that you can edit attributes on items and such in 1.6. I'm pretty sure it's going to be the same in 1.7, so hopefully I don't have to update this guide. I guess I'm calling it a guide. Anyway, let's get started. So the Enchanted Armor I have does not have any knockback resistance on it, but these unenchanted pieces have some knockback resistance. So that's what this video is about, I guess. It's knockback resistance. So first of all, I'll show you what one knockback resistance does. Actually, first I should explain. So knockback resistance is any number from 0 to 1, or that's the values you can have as knockback resistance that actually makes a difference. Any value above 1 is going to give you the same effect as a knockback resistance of 1. You can imagine it as a percentage. So 1 is 100%, 0 is 0%. And that's easy to remember, I guess. And then you can have percentages. And the filter that I use is the Seth Bling's set attribute filter, and for some reason I can't do decimal points in the item attribute thing, so I just do percentages instead. I think it would basically do the same thing, except I can't have like half knockback resistance on an item without having to put like +1 and then -50% or something stupid like that. But anyway, this is what knockback resistance does. You go up to a skeleton, he shoots you, you don't get knocked back. It's all because of this, so if I take this off, I will get knocked back. If I put it back on, I will not get knocked back. That is what +1 knockback resistance does. So you can see that if you had that in like a CTM map, that could be extremely useful for both just avoiding getting knocked back when you're trying to run away, or blocking, or basically anything you just don't want to be interrupted doing. Knockback resistance is extremely helpful for. It's kind of overpowered, to be honest. But anyway, and the thing about percentage knockback resistance is if you don't have like a plus number and you just have the percentage, it takes the percentage of your current knockback resistance, which is default at 0. So as you can see, if I go up to the skeleton and he shoots me, no matter how many times he shoots me, I will not get the knockback resistance effect, because it's taking 50% of 0 and trying to add that to 0, which gives you 0. So I don't have any knockback resistance attribute with just these. And if I tried stacking 1 with 50%, you don't get any additional effects. It still gives you the +1 knockback resistance. So yeah, it just doesn't do anything more. And I have a punch bow skeleton over here, which I put here to show the effect of knockback resistance on punch bows on skeletons. As you can see, it does nothing still. So punch does not affect player knockback unless you have a negative percentage, or so if I put this, gives me a -50% knockback resistance. So I should have about like 50% knockback resistance off of this, so half the time I will be knocked back. You can see that with this. So yeah, about half the time I will be knocked back. And well, actually, to be honest, I'm getting knocked back quite a bit less than half of the time. I'm not sure how that's calculated. But yeah, I think it's a weird percentage thing that takes like only 25% off of the 1 or something, and it gives me 75%. It's kind of confusing, but that is negative percentage on knockback resistant items. So if I put -1 knockback resistance on with a +1 knockback resistance, it's kind of obvious it'll be back down to 0, so I will get knocked back the full amount every time because I have 0 knockback resistance because of the +1, -1. And then plus 50%, if I put that on, it's taking 50% of the 0, I believe. It's not like I tested all of these combinations yet, but yeah, I will get knocked back with that. So yeah, that's how negative knockback resistance works. And if you're wondering, negative knockback does not get you knocked back more or less, it just... Negative is equitable to 0 knockback resistance. So yeah, you're going to get hit back just as much as if you didn't have it on, if you have -1. But, and then yeah, 50%, okay. So now let's talk about the mobs and their knockback resistance. As of 1.6, I believe, zombies have a default knockback resistance of 5%. So 5% of the time you hit them, they will not get knocked back. It's a cool little zombie mechanic, but I altered this guy to have 0 knockback resistance in MC Edit, so he won't get knocked back by... Well, he will get knocked back by anything. I have a punch bow here, and then this guy has a knockback resistance of 1, so no matter how many times you hit him, he will not get knocked back, unless you have a punch bow. With mobs, if you have a punch bow, the zombie will get knocked back regardless of his knockback resistance, but he'll get knocked back less. So I don't want to give him a full charge shot, but yeah, he didn't get knocked back nearly as much as the zombie over here would have been. So you can see he like really gets knocked back, while this guy only gets a little bit knocked back. Lag there, huh? Well, it's kind of hard to see with these things going on here, but you can see a punch bow like working on a... Wow, I'm getting a lot of lag. What is this? Alright, that world was lagging like crazy because of some other test that was near the location I was at. But anyway, on this test world, it's a different world. It's kind of a specialized test world for super secret, for something super secret, so don't pay attention to any of those wool squares over there. Anyway, so there's a couple things I missed. One of them is I made these so that you can actually see how much the zombies are getting knocked back by the arrow. And you can see this is punch 2, and that guy without the knockback resistance, he's got knockback resistance of the default 5%, so he won't be getting the knockback resistance all that often. Versus this guy who always has it, you can see he barely gets knocked back by this punch 2 bow compared to this guy. So yeah, that's a better representation of that effect, because the cages I made for him weren't that great on the other world. So anyway, I forgot to mention the knockback resistance on items that you hold in your inventory and not only your armor. So as you can see, I don't have any knockback resistance on my armor, but I have it on this sword. +1, so that I'll always get the knockback resistance effect. And then this one doesn't have any knockback resistance on it, it's just got the attack damage attribute, which will be saved for another video, by the way, the attack damage. So this is how much I get knocked back by that explosion without knockback resistance, and this is how much I'll get knocked back with knockback resistance. So as you can see, I barely got knocked back at all, if at all. And of course, if you went up really close, you still get knocked back a little bit with knockback resistance when it's an explosion, but nothing compared to if you didn't have the knockback resistance. See that? That's how high you go without knockback resistance versus how high you go with knockback resistance. So, oh yeah, I want to show you also that. So if you degrade your knockback resistant armor or weapon, you can take it to an anvil and repair it, and it'll keep the knockback resistance attribute. So you can repair things that were given to you that have knockback resistance. And by the way, you can see that because I edited the knockback resistance attribute on this diamond sword and didn't re-put on the attack damage attribute, it lost all of its attack damage. So attacking the mobs with this diamond sword is basically punching the mob. So that's something you want to watch out for if you're editing knockback resistance values. That you make sure you put on the attack damage attribute back in the sword if you want to keep that. So I think that's all I wanted to say about the knockback resistance. So I'll make a new attribute video next time. I'm not sure if I'll do attack damage or follow distance. I'm gonna try to cover as many as I think are necessary for, you know, like map makers who want to know the basics of the new attributes. Or I say new, but now they're coming out with 1.7, which is technically way more new than 1.6 attributes. Well, anyway, I guess I'll see you for the next attribute guide.